a note of attendees and speakers, but if virtual attendees wish to speak, they should indicate with the yellow hand icon and we will pick this up in the meeting. This meeting is also being streamed and also recorded by the Council for subsequent broadcast via the Council's internet site. So if I can start with Cabinet members, if they can introduce themselves and state their portfolio area, which is for the benefits of any viewers watching the meeting. In fact, I just realised I didn't introduce myself, so I'm Councillor Perai Ahmet and I'm the leader of the Council. Mike, if I can move to you.
Mike Hakata, Deputy Leader, Cabinet Member for Environment, Transport and the Climate Emergency.
Lucia Das-Neves, Cabinet Member for Health, Social Care and Wellbeing.
Councillor Chandwani, Cabinet Member for Customer Service, Welfare and Public Realm.
And Councillor Ruth Gordon, Cabinet Member for House Building, Placemaking and Development.
Councillor John Bevan, Cabinet Member Planning, Licensing and Housing.
Councillor Diakidis, Cabinet Member for Finance and Transformation.
Julie Davis, Cabinet Member for Employment, Skills and Corporate Services.
Zina Brabazon, Cabinet Member for Early Years Children and Families.
Councillor Daldogan, Cabinet Member for Stronger and Safer Communities.
Thank you all, and thank you, Councillor Gordon, because your voice sounds a bit worse for wear, so we'll bear with you. And welcome to Councillor Dawn, his first Cabinet meeting tonight. Do we have any apologies, Felicity? I don't believe we do, no. So just on to item 3, which is urgent business. There are no items of urgent business, but there is late business to be considered in relation to items 9 and 10. An addendum has been published and circulated to the Cabinet and is available on the Council's website. And as Chair, I do formally accept these items of late business. At item 9, legal comments were omitted in error from the published report, and as there's a statutory requirement for the Cabinet to consider these comments, we've included them. And at item 10, there is additional information that the Cabinet member will refer to in their introduction to the report. Can I take declarations of interest, please? Councillor Chandwani.
I'm declaring an interest that I live within the LTN for St Anne's, and I won't be participating in that vote or discussion.
Thank you. Councillor Das-Neves.
I'm declaring interest for item 11, and I live within the area of the Bounds Green LTN.
I declare an interest in item 12. I'm a St Anne's Ward resident and my street is directly affected by the proposals. I intend to absent myself for this item.
Okay, and just for clarity, Councillors Davis and Chandwani won't be present for the item, but Councillor Das-Neves, because your road isn't directly affected, you will be present for the item. Okay, item 5, which is notice of intention to conduct business in private, any representations received and the response to any such representation. So items 23 to 27 will be conducted in private. There was no representations received at the agenda publication stage in relation to the exempt items on the agenda. So if we can move on to the minutes, so if we can just confirm and agree the minutes of the meeting held on the 9th of November 2021 as a correct record. Do all Cabinet members agree? Okay, and item 7, which is matters referred to Cabinet by the Overview and Scrutiny Committee. Don't believe any items have been received. On to item 8, which is deputations, petitions and questions. We do have one deputation for consideration at this meeting, and this was put forward by Jacob Secker. Jacob, are you here? if you could come forward, please. So you'll have 3 minutes in total to address the Cabinet. We'll have the opportunity to ask questions, and then the relevant Cabinet member will respond. So when you're ready, you've got 3 minutes.
I'm Jacob Secker, Secretary of the Broadwater Farm Residents Association. I'm here with Chris Hutton, who's the Chair of our Residents Association. We request that today's Cabinet meeting does not approve the proposals for Broadwater Farm. Our objection relates to Agenda Item 9, Broadwater Farm Estate designed for new homes and improvements. The proposals mean a large increase in rents for the new homes. This will very negatively affect current tenants and potential tenants. The proposals are likely to disproportionately affect black people and people from ethnic minorities and are discriminatory. The report to Cabinet adopts a dismissive attitude to those who will not be able to afford the new, more expensive homes. It argues that they do not have to move into them if they cannot afford the rent. This is a very bad case of institutional racism, which exposes the Council to challenge under the Equality Act, as I think your legal advice, your late legal advice may be indicating. The Council openly admits that its policies are likely to discriminate against people from ethnic minorities. No one should be prevented from renting council housing due to low income. The Council is telling people who cannot afford the new homes that they can just carry on living in the old flats that are in a poor state of repair while others move into the new housing. These points are shown on page 162 of the report in the Equalities Impact Assessment, where the Council explains that rents for the new homes could be up to 50% of market rent. 50% of market rent for a 3-bed would put you way beyond the social rent cap, so we're looking at an increase in rent for the 3-bedroom flats over and above what you pay for a 3-bedroom on a Broadwater Farm, an increase of £68 a week, including the service charges, assuming they stay the same. We're looking at 51% a week higher. The points are also illustrated on page 179 of the report. The Council admits here that people from black and ethnic minority communities could be disproportionately affected by higher rents. It sets it out clearly here. There's no point in denying it in this meeting, it's there clearly. The so-called mitigations set out on page 179 are absurd. A financial assessment is proposed for prospective tenants that will exclude low-income people from the new housing. Discretionary housing payments that are only short-term are suggested, not a mitigation. Finally, it is suggested that black people and people from ethnic minorities will benefit because they can still move into the remaining old properties on the estate that have lower rents. This is an insult. The proposals also include the demolition of the medical centre and the replacement of a much smaller facility. In our current medical centre, we have 4 consulting rooms available, with 4 available for medical uses, including the nurse. This will go down to 2.
Jacob, can I ask you to wind up?
Yeah. There are many other problems with the proposals we haven't got time for now. Since 2018, the residents of our estate have been misled about council intentions, and we believe we have been misled because the council proposals for the estate are discriminatory and harmful in their effects. We ask you to think again, honour your promise for council rents equivalent to what we pay now, scrap your proposal to destroy our community facilities. Also, given this very serious equalities impact of your proposals, we are demanding that you fund an independent lawyer with a strong background in equalities and civil rights to oversee the whole process of the regeneration, including the letting of the new homes. Thank you.
Thank you, Jacob. Do any Cabinet members have any questions? Councillor Bevan.
Yeah, thank you, Jacob, for your concerns. As you know, we've got big ambitions to improve Broadwater Farm Estate. That costs substantial sums of money, some of which will come from the new rents, and most of those people who will pay the new rents will be able to have help, financial help with their payments if their incomes are not substantial. We have nearly 3,000 people in temporary accommodation. We have thousands on our waiting list. We have ambitions to build new houses and improve our estates. Do you not agree that some of the cost of that should come from people who are occupying completely new flats with very reduced heating bills, down to probably a quarter of what present people will be paying? How do you suggest we finance all these aims and aspirations if we cannot recruit some of that, get some of that money from the rents, along with the government grants that we are able to obtain?
Well, the whole point is we don't know if people who are going to be the most housing need can access this new housing we're proposing to build. It looks like gentrification to us. This is the whole point. People who are benefit capped won't be able to access it. If you're increasing rents by up to £68 a week for a 3-bed, then you're going to hit the benefit cap, so they won't be able to move in anyway. The financial assessments that Haringey does aren't just about the benefit cap, by the way. They also look at your outgoings, your general state of finances, your vulnerability, and if you don't pass that, then we're worried that, you know, clearly there's going to be a recommendation that you can't have the new homes. So I don't think this proposal is helping poorer people and people in housing need at all. In terms of financing it, 2018 we were told, don't worry about financing it, we can finance all these new homes, it'll be equal rent, many more new council homes, and now we're told we can't finance it, we're going to have to ramp the rents up and we're going to have to gentrify your estate. So we have been conned and we don't accept it. We don't accept the finances. If this is the best you can do with an equalities assessment saying it's going to discriminate against people, you're just going to scrap it and we're going to have urgent talks about a proper plan for our estate. It's that simple. Well, then we can talk about the finances then.
Thank you. Any more questions? No. So if I can go to Councillor Gordon to provide a response.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Well, I'm going to start off by saying that I'm here to defend council housing. I have asked for honorary membership of Defend Council Housing in Haringey, actually, because I think I spend more of my time defending it, whilst Defend Council Housing spend a lot of its time attacking it, it seems. On the Broadwater Farm estate, the proposal is that we're going to be building 300 homes. They will be at 100% council rents. I don't see how in any shape or form that can be construed as gentrification. The estate as it stands at the moment has 10% of family homes. We will be increasing that to 30% of family homes. That will impact the BAME community, but it will impact them positively. So whenever we're doing these schemes, we are improving the estates. The homes that will be built will exceed the size standards, despite what you're saying in your deputation. The homes that will be built will either have gardens or balconies or terraces. There will be new streets formed in the estate. The streets will have houses that look out on the estate, making those streets safer for people that live in. We'll be able to decarbonise the whole of the Broadwater Farm estate. All of those have impacts on those residents and will disproportionately impact the BAME community in a positive way. And that's what the EQIA report says, that overall this is positive impact on the BAME community. And when we talk about investment, John Bevan has already made the points here. We're talking about £100 million investment from the housing revenue account. You know, Jacob, how the housing revenue account works. We're also talking about investing £70 million in refurbing the rest of the estate. These are massive investments, but we can only do it on the basis of the rental income that comes in. We're already letting council homes that we've just built and we've just let at formula rent. Every borough in London uses the formula that the government says we should use in order to do this. Now, I know you've raised some issue about whether we should arbitrarily decide to use some high value from another part of the borough in order to inflate the rent as part of the formula. That is not the case. You know, a surveyor will be used to give the values of the properties, and that's what will be used in the formula. But it will be a value based on Broadwater Farm valuations in that locale. And so I can't see how you can see there's anything other than a fair rental strategy here. I don't know if you're proposing that we just discount the rents for Broadwater Farm residents or whether we do it over the entire borough. But what about those residents in Tottenham Hale? What about those residents in the rest of the borough where we were building 1,000 homes and over 10 years, 3,000 homes? If we did that, then we would put such an enormous hole in the HRA that we wouldn't have any money for refurbishing the existing stock. So that's 20,000 people that would be looking to us for refurbishment and would be discriminated against. So I would say that we have got a fair formula. We've made an agreement that people whose homes have been demolished, when they want to return to the estate, that they will have a discount so that they will be only paying the average rent of an equal sized property on Broadwater Farm plus 10%, for which they will get a brand new home that is more spacious, that has more storage room, that has a garden, balcony or a terrace, and has energy saving, which could possibly save them up to £250 a year. So we think it's fair what we've done. I really would appeal to the RA to work with us on this. We've been working now for 2 years on that estate to develop these proposals. On the engagement that I've participated in, and I've spoken to lots of people on the estate, there's a lot of excitement about what the possibilities are here. And you know, I think that we can, if there's bits and pieces that you want to change or other residents that maybe the RA doesn't represent want to change, then we'll have those discussions, and that would be great to participate in that. But, you know, when I came to speak to your RA the other night, you'd already got the no votes leaflet already printed. So you'd decided even before I got there that's what you were going to campaign for. I hope you'll rethink, actually, because if there is a no vote on that, then yeah, we won't get the money from the GLA and we won't be able to build it out, and we will have to go back to square one with a blank sheet of paper and then put the whole scheme back for another 2 years. If that's what you want to impose on the residents of Broadwater Farm, then that's on your head. But I think the residents are thinking it's high time we got on with this, that they want the changes, that they appreciate the changes that have taken place. Those returnees will get a very fair rent, and other people who are eligible under the neighbourhood move scheme, neighbourhood move schemes, it means that we can relieve some of their overcrowding and other issues that are prevalent on the neighbouring blocks. So I would urge you to work with us and get the scheme underway. It is a fantastic scheme. It is 100%, I will say that again, it's 100% council homes. This is not gentrification. Please stop pretending that it is. We are talking about providing council homes at council rents, just as we're trying to do for all of our 1,000 homes that we will build, hopefully in the next year, and our 3,000 council homes that we will build in the next 10 years. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Gordon. If you can move back to the public seating area, we're going to move on to the substantive item. So item 9, which is the Broadwater Farm Estate designs for new homes and improvements, landlord offer ballot programme and relocation of existing facilities. And it's over to you, Councillor Gordon, to introduce the report.
Oh, I didn't switch my mic off. I don't really think I need to add much, considering that I've just spoken in response to the deputation, other than to say, you know, I really welcome this development, especially the increase in the number of high quality homes that we were putting on this estate, the increases, the improvements to the public areas that will come along with this scheme. As I said, we've got a total investment of £100 million going into this scheme, and you know, alongside of that, we're working with the local schools, we're working with local youth groups to design the estates, and it already has gone through many iterations already in terms of how people want to see the central square, what they want to do with the gardens, and with it making some of the green space much more usable on the estate. And there's been a huge amount of engagement with residents on that, so I would highly recommend this to the Cabinet. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Gordon. Do any Cabinet members have any questions? No, saving your voices, I suspect. Okay, I've got Councillor Corley-Harrison. Is he online? I can't see him in the room. Yeah, okay. Councillor Corley-Harrison, do you want to ask your question?
Thank you, Chair. Evening all. I've got 3 questions, if you don't mind, Councillor Gordon. So the papers say the scheme would deliver 122 new council homes over and above those being replaced, but that's subject to leaseholders returning. So does that mean that for each returning leaseholder, it would subtract a council home from the total? And if so, how many new council homes will be built if all of the leaseholders return? Given Tangmere and Northolt blocks, have to be demolished on safety grounds anyway, what's the fallback position and impact on residents if they were to vote no in the ballot? And it seems, fair that if homes are improved, rent should go up. But when you speak to residents ahead of the ballot, will you lay out in simple language and simple figures the potential increase in their rents, so in cash terms, rather than reference to percentage comparisons with average rents elsewhere in the borough?
Yes, thank you. Thank you for that. If I take those in reverse order, yes, absolutely, ahead of the ballot, we will be putting indicative rents. Obviously, it's going to take a couple of years to build this scheme out, so the rent would apply at the time that it was let. So with that caveat, nonetheless, what we can do is put out, a rent that if you were renting a 2-bed, for example, tomorrow, then this would be the rent that would apply. So it would be very clear, and we would just have to add the caveat that obviously in 2 years' time, we don't know what the government would do with council rents. They have in the past forced council rents down, of course, to save money on the benefits bill. So we'd have to put that caveat in, but yes, it would be very clearly put in advance of the ballot taking place and when the landlord offer goes out. If there is a no vote on the scheme, and I have to say that I am confident that there will be a yes vote. There's been a very, very positive response when I've been going round with my fellow colleagues in the cabinet and other council members and local councillors. Very confident that people actually overall welcome this this scheme and renewal of the estate. But if there's a no vote, we would have to go back and we would be essentially starting from scratch. There would be an enormous hole in the middle of the estate because we have to demolish the central the blocks because of health and safety reasons. So I think that would be extraordinarily unfortunate if we had to go down that route. But I am confident that we will win the vote. And I apologise, but I will have to hand over to an officer about the leaseholders because I don't want to give you the wrong figure on that. So if an officer could respond on my behalf. Thank you.
I can pick that up, Councillor. So in total, there are 13 leaseholders in Tangmere and 12 in Northolt and a further 3 in Stapleford. Resident leaseholders have a right to return. I don't have the breakdown of that total number of who's between resident and non-resident, but the total would be 28 maximum. But I know a number of those were subletting their properties. So if I can get back to you, Councillor, on the total number that would be that could potentially return if they chose to.
Sure. Yeah, that's fine. Thank you both.
Thank you. David J, did you want to add anything?
Okay, it's working now. No, I think David's covered the main points, but obviously some leaseholders have already decided to move elsewhere, so not all of those will return, and therefore not all of those will be subtracted from the number of council homes.
Thank you. Is there any other questions? Is there anyone online? Okay, sorry, because I thought I had a note for Councillor Hinchcliffe, but was that either or? Okay. Right, so if there's No more questions. If we can move to the resolution, which is to approve the recommendations as set out at pages 16 to 17. Do we all agree? Agreed. Thank you. So moving on to item 10, which is the Bruce Grove West Green low traffic neighbourhood. And Councillor Hakata, it's over to you to introduce the report.
Thank you, Chair. So this is the report that has come after 11 long months of unprecedented engagement in these schemes that enabled co-production of the original scheme designs and which included along that way feedback from the engagement and created key improvements to this scheme. So, for instance, we reconfigured and moved a number of the filters, changed or removed some of the school streets.
Apologies, Councillor Chamwani, I just have to ask you to sit in that area and not participate.
No, it's Bruce Grove.
This is Bruce Grove.
Yeah, no, do I have to sit down?
That's true. Yep. You represent one and live in the other. Apologies.
Yes, sir. I'll carry on. And included actually removing one of the filters. Officers have worked tirelessly, and all of this in new territory. And this is actually pioneering work, not just in infrastructure terms, but also in the very design process itself. Could it be improved? Could the process be improved? Of course it could. There is no such thing as perfection. For instance, 70% of the respondents in the last phase of the engagement, which was the formal consultation, 70% of those respondents were car owners, even though 60% of the residents in the area do not own a car. So obviously there is work we can do on a consultation level to effectively reach those people in the consultation. But I think in terms of what has been achieved here, and it is a key plank in our climate change action plan, key plank in our ability not only to reduce carbon and road traffic in the area, but also reduce road danger, increase road safety. In that respect, in part of the scheme we have got new crossings as well as school streets, as I mentioned, and it also will work effectively at increasing health outcomes in the area, as well as sorry, I lost my thread there. But yeah, health outcomes, carbon reduction, and many other things. So basically, I hope that you will see this in a positive light, that you will agree that what's being proposed here is transformational to the borough, and that obviously the next stage going in for the so if you agree for the implementation of this will be moving into the next phase, which is again a consultation phase. So the implementation isn't going in under experimental traffic order. So again, nothing is written in stone here. It can be, it's open to co-production, it's open to refinement, not compromise, because the key here is that we need to achieve the aims set out for the low traffic neighbourhood, but at the same time it needs to be alive to the local nuances. So with that, all I'd say is that, you know, I don't know about cart before the horse, but we are putting the pedestrian before the car. Thank you.
Councillor Headcat, I just wonder if you could make reference to the addendum.
Yeah, so we have added an addendum. Sorry, let me just find it here. Thank you. So I'll just read this out quickly. As part of the work to prepare for the implementation of the Bruce Grove and West Green low traffic neighbourhood, the council will carry out further engagement with residents on Broadwater Farm and the surrounding streets, the emergency services, including the local police team and council's community safety, highways and transport officers. The engagement will explore concerns, including those which relate to the impact of the proposals on resident safety and crime, and consideration will be given to making amendments in response. What I just would say with that is, again, this is us basing our implementation on the idea of a phased approach to the LTN, so we won't be implementing straight away, which gives us time to refine these schemes. And again, this isn't about compromise, this is about refinement. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hatter. Do any Cabinet members have any questions? Okay, so, Councillor Chamwani.
It's a bit more of a statement than a question, 'cause, this is the ward I represent. So, Mike, Councillor Carter, I think you would agree that West Green is quite a complex area, a bit like some of its councillors. I just want to say that I really do welcome the blue badge exemptions. You'd be surprised how many disabled bays and blue badge holders are just in West Green. Langham Road, for example, has got like 10 or something just on one road. The Send Transport arrangements and the Send School Streets removal around those two schools is welcome too. I think Councillor Brabazon might ask you something on that. And the additional checks of our stakeholders, including our local police, to ensure that we're absolutely right about Mount Pleasant and Broadwater Farm is welcome too. What I would say is that LTNs are like Marmite, and I do like Marmite, it's quite a well-known fact. But all residents I spoke to in West Green all want better air quality, and they want less traffic, and they want the through traffic to stop. So I feel that these changes will make more people more excited about the LTN, so I'm quite happy to support it.
Thank you, Councillor Chamwani. Yeah, sorry.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor. And I know that it wasn't put as a question and a comment, but I, really welcome those comments. And all I would say again on that is that we are making an unprecedented move in many ways because we had such a detailed and expansive engagement process. Part of that process being a disabled people and carers survey, which we have then returned to after, so that ran for several months. We returned to it to then get their update. We are going to be expanding our engagement with disabled people and people and their carers. But because of that, we were able to bring in an exemption scheme in a way that other boroughs have not been able to do at this stage in a program like this. So I think that's another example of where officers have really worked very hard to make sure that this is as inclusive and accessible as possible. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Gordon.
Yeah, well, mine was part comment, and I might put in a sneaky question at the end if I may. But it was just to say that from my own experience in Tottenham Hales, where I live and where I also represent, we've got a group called Healthy Streets Tottenham Hale, who I know you're familiar with because I got you to come over and meet them. But they are desperate to get in. So I know you've been extraordinarily brave, I think, because it is a controversial issue in pushing these schemes through. But at the moment, that group of residents is engaged in compiling a spreadsheet, and every day they record on the spreadsheet video clips, photographs and commentary from residents who are absolutely sick to the back teeth of having so much traffic coming through residential streets. Even in the last fortnight, they've sent me 2 video clips of a horrific flip accident of somebody coming round a bend, smashing into something else, mounting the pavement, woman in a buggy, looking absolutely shocked. There is too much traffic in residential streets, and this is the issue. So I suppose my little sneaky plea is, when you've put all this lot to bed and we've got it all over and done with, can you think about Tottenham Hales being top of your list?
Thanks, Councillor Gordon. And yeah, it was great to meet Healthy Streets, Tottenham Hale, and absolutely, I've seen some of those videos. We witnessed some of the awful traffic situation in that area. This is something that I found going across the borough, east to west, north to south. People begging for interventions that can bring down, that can improve the air quality, that can reduce the road danger, and also reduce the congestion and make their neighbourhoods more livable. At the moment, they're not livable and they're not safe for many, many reasons. So, in our walking and cycling action plan, we've laid out a programme of potentially 25 low traffic neighbourhoods, in which Tottenham Hale is one of the ones that figure. We will be looking at, we'll be getting the feedback from that consultation that's live now. And once we've collated all the data from that, we'll be in a position to start building a sort of picture of where we go next once we've implemented these. Thanks.
Thank you. Councillor Robertson.
Thank you. Thanks, Chair. I was very encouraged to see in the report that there are exemptions for special needs, both for blue badge holders, but also for school transport. And you will appreciate, as you'll know from our correspondence, that this is an issue which is of massive concern and will be of massive concern to families if we don't get it right. So I was really pleased to see that, and also to have the response from the officers. But can I ask you if you want to provide any further clarification regarding next steps at this meeting? I understand the meetings are now being organised in order to iron out all the nuances that are involved in this. Given we have 2 special schools in that area, it is of particular relevance. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Brabazon. And yeah, absolutely, you're correct. We have included exemptions for send transport. We're aware that obviously one of the key factors here that must be recognised is that the aim of these schemes is to reduce the overall volume of traffic, and in reducing that overall volume of traffic, that will make life easier for those people that have to use a car or some form of motor traffic. So the ultimate aim is to achieve that, and obviously we want that sooner rather than later. In the meantime, and this is really where exemptions come in more than anywhere else, is in that bedding in period, there obviously can be inconvenience, and it's really important that those people who have obstacles in their lives do not have additional obstacles during that time. So that's why we brought that in. And through conversations with yourself, with Councillor Dasnefs as well, in the adult service, it's become clear with myself and with officers that we need to build even more connections internally, cross-departmental connections, so that the transport planning team, the adults team and the children's team can work together to ensure that that no one is negatively impacted. Thank you.
Councillor Dasnefs.
Thanks, Councillor Carter. I just wanted to make a statement really as well and support the efforts that you're making to both engage with our diverse community and with everyone, and make sure that LTNs don't exclude, and take account of both our disabled community, those who are older, who need their cars, blue badge users, really important, but also their families and their networks. And I know that you've started that dialogue, and that the connections you're building with officers will continue to do that. So we welcome that, and I know that we have a very active and vibrant activist and advocate community in Haringey, which will continue to talk to you and work with me as well. So thank you, and I very much support that work.
I think that was more of a statement. Is there any more questions on this one, Councillor Davis?
Yes, we've all received a lot of emails from people both for and against the scheme, this scheme and others. Some have raised some quite detailed concerns relating to individual sites. I'm thinking here of, I've had some about the Scout campsite. Can you give us an assurance that these issues will be looked at really carefully and that the people representing these organisations are taken seriously and that they feel that they've been properly listened to and their concerns taken into account?
Yep, that's a really good point, and absolutely, I think this is another example where absolutely throughout this whole process we've been engaging people as much as we can. Again, that process can be improved, and we've had 11 months of engagement to be able to learn lessons of where there might have been it might not have been as good as it could be. So at every step we're looking at how we can make sure that those nuanced impacts are listened to and acted on. So absolutely. And the next phase is obviously, if we go to the implementation phase, that will be a live consultation. Thanks.
Thank you. Any more Cabinet members? Okay, Councillor Corley-Harrison.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, my question is largely follow on from what Councillor Brabazon mentioned, actually. So firstly, could you just clarify that the exemption for SEND transport will also apply to private providers that offer the service privately? And in many instances, LTNs do increase particular routes and journey times. Some SEN children are already unable to be picked up directly outside of their doors due to transport routes, time constraints and that sort of thing. So have you considered how the problem might be exacerbated by LTMs where physical filters mean that that particular vehicle's journey changes, the route changes? And then similarly, have you considered the kind of financial impact on those with disabilities or carers looking after those with disabilities who have to pay for things like accessible taxis, who might also end up having to take a slightly longer journey due to the physical filters, even if they have an exemption through some of the AMPR or whatever other interventions?
Thank you, Councillor. Well, again, just to start the response to that by saying that obviously the key aim, well, one of the key aims of the low traffic neighbourhood in the Bruce Grove West Green area will be to reduce the overall volume of traffic, and in reducing that overall volume of traffic will make journey times actually easier and journeys better, and that's what we're hoping to see, and that is what evidence across the capital from scheme after scheme after scheme is showing, that there is an overall reduction of traffic on those schemes, including on the boundary roads. In terms of this specific scheme, one of the points in the exemptions section is for special dispensations. So we will be working again closely with the children's team and with the adults team to recognise anyone who may be falling into that category and make sure that we are in conversations with them as early as possible, so that if they do need a dispensation and an exemption, that they will be able to get one. In terms of this specific scheme, we have had, our engagement, we have been listening. Our engagement has resulted in changes. Some of those changes have meant that filters have either been moved or, so for instance, in this one, so that the majority of school access, for instance, to the Grove and to Rusper Road, though the Grove Special School, that one's they wanted to come in from Downhill's Way, which is something that is now enabled, which wasn't in the original design. So we have been listening to those, and so for those parents and for those pupils, they shouldn't see a negative impact, but obviously we will be monitoring that very closely, financial impact and journey times, etc. But hopefully we'll be able to mitigate those before the scheme is implemented. Thanks.
Thank you. There's no more questions. If we can move to the resolution, which is to approve recommendations as set out at pages 195 to 196. Do we all agree? Great, thank you. Item 11, which is the Bounds Green low traffic neighbourhood. Councillor Hakata, over to you. Thank you. Just before, I just wanted to clarify, because I think there was some mistake in the beginning. So there's 3 members today who live in roads that are filtered, as according to the proposals, and I didn't realise. So Councillor Dasnev, you do live in a street where there's a proposal to filter, so you cannot participate in that one. It's a prejudicial interest, so if you can take a seat back there while the conversation happens. Councillor Carter.
Okay, well, obviously this is the second one, so I won't repeat myself. But I'll try not to repeat myself too much. But all I would say is that again, this scheme has come about through unprecedented engagement. Disabled people's and carers survey was undertaken. A large number of people from the Bounds Green area responded to that consultation. We did have a petition from one of the areas in the Bounds Green area calling for timed filters in the area, and we did have a very good look and analysis of this. And again, it goes back to my point of the fact that we certainly have been listening to feedback, but what we are after is refinement, not compromise, and timed filters will not actually deal with the issue, which is, will not achieve the ultimate aims, which is the reduction of motor traffic in the area. So with this, we have gone ahead with all that. Actually, one thing I will just add to that is that we did listen to the people in that area who did ask for access on Albert Road. In the original designs, there was only access on Bounds Green Road. We have changed that, so there's access on both of those roads. So just as an example, that it is about refinement to those schemes, and we have been listening and acting on that principle. So I think, I will just leave it there for any questions. And again, all I will say is that with this, it's the cart before the horse, the pedestrian before the car. Thank you.
Thank you. Questions from Cabinet members? Councillor Jamwani.
Councillor Carter, so if we were to agree this evening, when do you see this in action?
Thank you. Okay, so the aim is to obviously get going as soon as possible. We are in a hiatus period right now, just before Christmas, where highways aren't actually allowed to implement anything. So it would have to happen after Christmas. We'll be looking at as soon into the new year as we can. Our aim being January, probably mid to late January is what we'd be aiming for the first implementations, putting in the filters as well as the work to begin on bringing in the school streets and the 2 crossings that are also part of this scheme. So late January.
Any other questions? Okay. Councillor Corley-Harrison.
Thank you, Chair. So firstly, the Alexandra Ward councillors who this scheme actually covers two wards, they couldn't be here this evening, but they asked me to make the point that they strongly support the proposals. But that being said, I still have some questions, of course. So despite the amount of documentation within the pack, within the Cabinet papers, there seems to be limited sort of in-depth detail on the implementation of the trial. So for it to work, Haringey needs to be able to monitor the traffic and air pollution and provide ways for residents to feed back possible tweaks. You mentioned that in the last item. When will we receive more information on what, how and where specific monitoring will be placed and what the means are to be for residents to be able to provide feedback? And one of the biggest concerns from residents already in the consultation to date from those on Albert and Durnsford Road was the possibility of an increased volume of traffic on their already busy roads, at least in the short term anyway. And many residents have asked for additional traffic calming measures, speed cameras, etc. So taking residents with us on implementing these schemes is obviously important. Are there any plans for mitigation measures specifically on those 2 very busy roads that would come in as part of the scheme? And you'll remember, because I remember pointing it out to you on a site visit, Mike, but there were some problems around lack of clear signage when some of the school streets were implemented. And there were similar problems with the introduction of the LTNs in Enfield, similar signage issues. So given that, what learnings are you taking forward to ensure that it's clear to drivers they're about to enter an LTN, particularly in areas where it is done through a camera filter rather than a physical filter?
Thank you. Okay, I'll answer it sort of backwards, because I think officers can come in with a bit more detail with the information on the ATC monitoring and vivacity camera monitoring program and processes. In terms of signage, absolutely, we'll be working with working on schemes where the signage will be absolutely clear. What I would say is that the school street signs, which you were sort of criticising there, but actually we go way beyond the letter of the law with our school street signage, just for the record, where there only needs to be one sign at the side, at the entrance to a road. We always have two, plus we have pre-warning signs on all our school streets as well, so people recognise that they are coming up to a school street. A lot of the time, the reason why people are caught out by school streets is simply because they are habitually using the streets as a cut through in front of a school. And what we find is that the fines are generally quite high at the beginning of a scheme. This is nationwide, not just in Haringey. And then they dip down massively after the introduction of the scheme. The more fines there are at the beginning of the scheme, the more argument there should be a school street there, basically. In terms of mitigations on Albert Road and Bounds Green Road, again, it comes back to the same issue, which is ultimately the point at the moment. At the moment, Haringey lags behind other boroughs. Other boroughs don't necessarily are now seeing a decrease in through traffic issues. So, Waltham Forest being one of the best examples, because it's had low traffic neighbourhood schemes for the last 6 years. Haringey at the moment has a big welcome sign to cars at its borders. So Albert Road, Durnsford Road, Brownlow Road, all of those roads that go through, and also coming off from Bounds Green Road, are all used as cut throughs to get round that north-east section of the A406. So once it becomes harder to get through the disincentivizing of driving using Haringey as a cut through, we should see a decrease in that traffic. Speed cameras is not something that we can bring in, because that is to do with the police, and we can't enforce speed cameras. That is a police issue, but we will definitely be monitoring the traffic volumes very, very carefully. ATC and vivacity cameras have all been installed across the borough, but I will pass over to officers to give a bit more information on that monitoring. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Carter. I'm Rob Sosowski, the Assistant Director for Planning, Building Standards and Sustainability. You've covered most of it. I'll probably elaborate more on the monitoring issues. So you're right, as part of sort of separate to LTNs, actually more generally, we're doing more work on monitoring the roads across the borough, not just about LTNs, but just generally to improve the information that we have on that, so that we can monitor things like LTNs and the impact of that. That's really important to keep a close eye on that. So some of that work has already started, and that will monitor things such as on the busy roads that have been mentioned already. It's worth just pointing out, in the report pack, there's the high-level transport assessment for this LTN and the other LTNs, which does talk about the impacts on the wider area and does start to point to where mitigations may or may not be necessary. So I think that covers the questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Rob. So if there's no further questions, if we can move to the resolution, which is to approve the recommendations as laid out at pages 513 to 514. Do we all agree? Agreed. Thank you. Item 12, which is the St Anne's low traffic neighbourhood, and I believe Councillors Davis and Chanwani will be exempt from this item. And Councillor Dasnev is returning. Okay, Okay, so Councillor Hakata, when you're ready, over to you for the introduction.
Okay, well, again, I'm not going to repeat too much. Obviously, this is about reducing road traffic. It's about reducing speeding, reducing road danger, improving air quality, improving health outcomes, and improving the social and neighbourhood aspects that we so desperately need. With St Anne's, there were two options that were put forward. One would be a sort of semi-LTN and would still enable some north-south routes through the ward. The other option, otherwise known as option A, would close off all north-south corridors through traffic through the ward. Option A includes a bus gate on Blackboy Lane, which would basically enable the public transport to go through, buses, but not private cars, which we're seeing about 10,000 a day going past a primary school and a park on that road. So I'm very pleased to say that during that consultation there was a very clear mandate, well, not mandate, but a clear feeling by local residents that they wanted option A and they wanted to see the improvements from the most robust implementation. So we're obviously very happy with that, and that our message was able to get out in an effective way. And there's something that we can look at there about how we managed to properly communicate the benefits of a low traffic neighbourhood in the St Anne's area. So with that, I'll leave it to questions.
Thank you. Do we have any questions? Okay. Councillor Corley-Harrison.
Thank you, Chair. There's a lot of concerns regarding the possible impact on Green Lanes and on Haringey Ward from this particular scheme. So can you confirm what steps are being taken to ensure any problems that arise in these areas are managed swiftly, and whether areas bordering the proposed LTNs will be prioritised in the next tranche of LTNs, which I assume is coming engagement this year or next year now, isn't it, really? Secondly, obviously a monitoring period is necessary to see the impact of the LTN trials, but will there be any processes in place to swiftly deal with any really serious issues that become very quickly apparent within the trial time, rather than waiting until 3 months, 6 months or whatever? And over the 3 reports, were you concerned by the relative low car owners who engaged with the consultation process? Are there any future consultations?
Sorry, Councillor Corley-Harrison, we lost you a little bit. Do you just want to repeat that? Just the last 2 sentences, yeah.
So are you concerned by the relatively low number of non-car owners who engaged with the consultation process, who seem to be underrepresented, and will you attempt to how will you attempt to increase the numbers of those people in future consultations?
Okay, thank you. I'll try and answer half of it and then defer to officers as well. In terms of engagement, absolutely, that's that has been an issue. I think there is an underlying aspect here, which is that people are more likely to respond to a consultation, a formal consultation, if they feel that they are likely to be negatively impacted, and that's certainly been the case in these schemes, where majority of people that responded were car owners, even though the majority of people who live in the borough are not. So obviously there was a disproportionate aspect there, and we do need to work on that, and it's something that maybe officers can have a mention on. In terms of the impacts in terms of bringing in mitigating aspects, again, these are experimental traffic orders, so we have the ability to act very fast and either to move or remove a filter if that is the case. A lot of the time what we'll find is that it might be a bottleneck to do with parking space that actually needs to be taken out. It's these kind of things. So we'll be looking very carefully and monitoring very carefully all the different aspects of why something might not be working. In terms of the impact on green lanes, we have got a separate green lane study that is starting imminently, and that will be looking at how we can massively increase and facilitate the movement of public transport as well as active travel. So I'll pass over to officers.
Thank you, Councillor. Just on the question about green lanes, in the report in paragraph 6.93, it does talk about there's emerging work on the green lanes traffic and transport study, which will help determine any further complementary measures that are required for this. So that's something that we're taking very seriously and keeping a close eye on to make sure that can be done. And in advance of any implementation of the LTN. So that's really, really important, and we're aware of issues around that. And then on dealing with sort of quick issues when the trials are implemented, there are delegated powers as part of the recommendations to be able to do that. So if it is in the interests of the council's network management duty to do with the flowing of traffic, etc., then there are ways of doing that. And then finally on the point about engaging more with non-car owners, there's lots of lessons we can learn from the 3 engagements we've done in the last 11 months, and we will certainly learn those lessons, but also when these schemes get implemented, that triggers a 4th stage of consultation, and clearly we would expect interest from people that we haven't already heard from at that point as well, who quite probably will be non-car owners as well as car owners. So hopefully that helps answer that point as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Rob. Is there any more questions on the St Anne's LTN? No. Okay, if we can move to the resolution, which is to approve the recommendations as set out at pages 824 to 826. Do we all agree? Agreed. Okay, so if we can ask Councillor Chanwani and Davis to come back, we can move on to item 13. Okay, so if we can move to item 13, which is the decision of the Council's proposal to bring Homes for Haringey in-house. And if I can hand over to Councillor Davis to introduce the report.
Thank you. If I could draw your attention to the Cabinet Member introduction, which is on page 1079. This is the report that recommends the insourcing of Homes for Haringey. We have completed our consultation with residents. There is overwhelming support for moving forward to bring both organisations together. We believe it will enable us to take advantage of opportunities to improve our delivery of housing. And just to say that, to draw your attention to the recommendations, I'd like to pass over to Mark Bagent, who I believe is on the call here. But this is the report is from 1079 onwards.
Thank you. Yes, so the recommendations are set out in section 3 of the report, and as you'll see, the first recommendation relates to noting and considering the results of the consultation with tenants and leaseholders, and you've got a lot of detail on that set out in Appendix A, which provides a breakdown of the responses received and an analysis of those responses. And we also have Appendix B to consider, which is a submission from the Board of Homes for Haringey, So the board members met and put their views together and provided that submission. And finally, the third appendix is the Equalities impact assessment, which demonstrates the positive impacts of this proposal. In the recommendations, the second recommendation is the proposal to approve the insourcing of these services, and it sets out in some detail the processes that will need to happen, which we're asking Cabinet to delegate to officers of the Council to implement. So that will include terminating the management agreement, that's the legal agreement with Homes for Haringey, and finalising the organisational structure for bringing all of the staff from Homes for Haringey back into the Council. So that will involve consulting those staff under the relevant legal regulations. It will obviously involve transferring all the financial budgets, financial processes, and resolving any other legal issues that need to be sorted out, such as either bringing across contracts that Homes for Haringey holds or terminating them and replacing them, and making sure that property leases that are held by Homes for Haringey can continue, and that the support to the Haringey Community Benefit Society, which provides homeless accommodation, can also continue. So all of that's set out in some detail in the report. We're also asking Cabinet to approve that further work is done on the resident engagement procedures and arrangements that will take place in the future when Homes for Haringey has wound up its work. And so that will involve further co-design and co-production with residents. And finally, there's a budget provision which we're asking Cabinet to approve that environment for this financial year and next financial year to cover the one-off costs of implementing this. I'm very happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Mark. Do any Cabinet members have any questions? Councillor Baberson.
Yeah, it's just, I wonder whether you could just tell us a little bit more about the cross-party working group, which is just mentioned on page 1085.
Yes, the cross-party working group has met twice. There's been engagement from members of both parties and a lot of interest in how the process has unfolded. We've also had a sounding board meeting. That's a residents group to engage residents with to seek residents' opinions both on how the insourcing would take place and how future tenant involvement and tenant and leaseholder involvement would look post insourcing. But both groups have met throughout the process.
Thank you, Councillor Davis. Any more questions from the Cabinet? Councillor Catter.
Yeah, can there be some reassurance about the, in terms of the transfer and the integration of human resources, how that will pan out?
Well, if tonight's decision is made, then obviously there would be a systematic project plan, and we move into informal, formal and legal consultation processes as far as the transfer of contracts. But there's already been a great deal of engagement with staff, talking to them about the possibilities of the project and talking to them about how they want things to work. So I'm confident that the pieces are in place now for the transfer of staff, should we make the decision this evening.
Thank you. Any more questions? Okay, Councillor Corley-Harrison.
Thank you, Chair. Sorry, my screen's just frozen. So almost all councils bringing Almos back in-house targeted efficiency savings for the reasons set out in 4.3 but most didn't achieve them. So what specific level of efficiency savings over and above the costs of insourcing are you targeting, and what processes will you put in place to ensure that you are able to succeed where other councils haven't been able to? And in-house council housing management often lacks the transparency on both performance and value for money metrics that are a requirement of an ALMO by their parent authorities. So will Haringey continue to publish those statistics in the same way that Homes for Haringey currently does? And can you confirm that the resident scrutiny panel will be maintained once the service has been brought back in-house, as well as the continuation of some form of housing board that includes councillors on it? Thank you.
I'm happy to take the last one and then defer to officers for the other two. We can't confirm at this stage that the resident scrutiny panel will continue in the form it currently is, because this is going to be a completely new discussion, and this has been formed part of our engagement with the sounding board as to what does future tenant voice look like, and we're very keen to expand it and make it even stronger than it currently is. So can I hand over on the costs and the transparency issue to Mark or David?
I'll have it. So I think the issue around savings, as the report, there are an announcement bringing services together should enable better service delivery, and in many cases it should allow service delivery to be streamlined. So that should deliver efficiency savings. At this stage, we haven't quantified in detail what those savings would be. And in terms of setting a target, this report doesn't attempt to do that. Clearly, there are costs involved in this transfer going ahead, and we would expect that over time we would achieve savings that would offset those costs and enable further reinvestment in frontline service delivery. And the report makes a commitment to report back to Cabinet in future on the achievement of those efficiencies and the reinvestment of those savings. In terms of the transparency around performance and value for money, I think that the key part of the answer to that is looking at the role of the regulator of social housing, and how one of the reasons for this transfer is to strengthen the council's ability to respond to the regulation that we know is coming, as the white paper that the government published in 2020 set out, that the role of the regulator of social housing, particularly in relation to local authority landlords, is going to be strengthened. And so it's absolutely clear that the council will need to make that kind of performance information and value for money information available to the regulator and, of course, to the residents as part of that process.
Thank you, Mark. David, did you want to add anything?
Sorry,
yeah.
Before you, there was a question also about whether the board would continue with council representation, Councillor Davis. Well.
Do you want me to go?
Sorry, Councillor Corley-Harrison, I didn't catch that.
Sorry, I think there's feedback coming from the studio. I asked about the resident scrutiny panel, but also whether the current housing board will continue in some form, the one which has councillors' representation on it, the Homes for Haringey board, but obviously it wouldn't be that or called that.
There are no firm decisions about that aspect of representation at the moment. All I can say is that all the feedback from the cross-party working group and the sounding board is that people want representation mechanisms to be as broad and as deep as possible. So nothing is ruled out at this stage.
Yeah, and what I would add to that is we are reviewing different models from across the country in terms of models which councils are taking to look at the engagement of tenants and providing tenants and residents with a voice, and in terms of how our housing services are run, and obviously of particular importance in Haringey is ensuring good representation from all communities, including communities where English is not the first language, and that is really, really important for us in the model that we're coming up with, and we're looking at best practice elsewhere on that front.
Thank you, David. If there's no more questions. Oh, John, apologies.
Yeah, as a Cabinet Member for Housing, perhaps I can just say a few words. I've also been on the Homes for Haringey board quite recently. So Homes for Haringey delivers many excellent services. It has some problems as well. So obviously our aim is to make sure that the excellent services are continued as far as possible. Well, not as far as possible, that they do actually continue, and to improve the areas where there are some problems. And as has been said, one of the big drivers for this is all the outcomes from the Grenfell issue. The government regulation is changing to such an extent, and it is quite complicated, and we need to implement and be assured that we can deal with all that, and having all the housing in one sort of service together enables us to do that in a much more effective and with some much more certainty as well. So just my comments there.
Thank you. So if we can move to the resolution, which is to approve the recommendations as set out at pages 1079 to 1080. Do we all agree? Agreed. Excellent. On to item 14, which is the 2021-22 Finance Update Q2, and Councillor Diakides to introduce the report.
Yeah. Thank you, Leader. This is the standard report for the first 6 months, monitoring how we're doing on our expenditure and keeping within the budget. As in previous years, it is obviously indicating at this stage a significant risk of overspending. The worrying thing is that it is worse the situation than it looked at Q1. Not unusual, but nevertheless it is worrying under the current circumstances. And a big effort is being made at the moment by the Finance Service together with the various directorates to reclaim the situation as much as possible, as it happened in the past. The fact that in the past we managed to balance in the end the budgets isn't a guarantee that it will happen again, and therefore we do take it very, very, very seriously at this moment in time. A preliminary analysis indicates that the key reasons are the post-pandemic situation with implications on both the demand of some of the demand-led services, more cases than we had predicted or the services had predicted, but also inflation on some of the provisions that we have to buy from outside in particular. In some cases it's very, very high. Whether that would last for very long, I don't know. And some of the overspend is accounted by delays in some savings that they were meant to be happening now, that they will probably slip into next year, but nevertheless will create a bad situation for this year. If we don't balance the budget again this year, that means a serious risk of eating into our reserves, and that might cause that which will have to be replenished in future years, and therefore we've got to make every effort. The report also covers a bit some adjustments that need to be made, as usually at this stage, on our capital projections, and also about some debt write-offs, that the uncollectible debts and so on. I'll stop here, Leader, and I've got the director and the deputy director here that can answer any detailed questions.
Excellent, thank you. Are there any questions? from cabinet members, I should say, in the first instance. No. Okay. Councillor Cooley-Harrison.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Equalities. I'm getting quite a bit of feedback, so hopefully you can hear me. Given the expenses form part of the estimates from last year's budget, why were they so consistently inaccurate, and how can we have confidence that the future projections will be more accurate? And can you confirm how COVID contributed to the budget pressures in children's social care? And then on page 1138 of the pack, reference is made to nearly £1 million of lost court cost income. Can you confirm what that largely relates to, please?
I think I'll ask the director to address this, just in case I make some mistake on the detail. There's a lot of detail involved in this one. John, are you in a position to?
Thank you. The line isn't great, actually, or the speaker system's not great, so I think I caught the majority of the questions that Councillor Cooley-Harrison asked there. So you've raised why we have the level of variation that we have in the year to date, and the analysis that we continue to maintain, put in place last year when the COVID pandemic first hit, is to try and establish as best as we can do the drivers behind it. And as you can see from the report, over half of the problem actually relates to the direct consequences that we're directly able to describe as being caused by COVID. And the majority of those are going to be met either in the form of emergency grant from the government again, or from a different form of grant, which is to cover lost income. The net gap that we're forecasting caused directly by COVID is around £1 million. The biggest problem we have, as Councillor Diakides was describing then, is the other pressures. But I would say that there is something of a grey area between the two distinctions, and we try to play a straight bat on this, but when members read the narrative of why both the care services, adults and children's, are showing the size of the budgetary gaps, the variations that we have in this year so far, you don't have to read them very long before you start thinking, well, actually, yes, they're not attributed to COVID, but clearly that is an awfully large factor within this, isn't it? The change that's had in the way that communities are, and in the way that we're having to respond to those needs. So certainly that is a very large component element of why we have the level of variation that we're experiencing in this year. And members, it is worth noting that neither of those factors, in fact, none of the primary factors that we have driving our budgetary gap are particular to Haringey. They are very much being felt by London authorities. I know that because obviously we compare notes, and I doubt if there are many other authorities outside London either which are not experiencing these very same issues. So as Councillor Diakides has said, that we're trying to look to respond to those as best as we can in year, and there is quite detailed dialogue underway at this moment in time between ourselves, involving all of the directors, and we'll also involve the portfolio holders, about the sorts of measures that might be possible to try and improve upon this as far as is possible. I think the other point that Councillor Cooley-Harrison made was about the court income, and clearly the ability to pursue liabilities owed to the authority through the legal system has been greatly impaired this year by the courts being closed for a long time and then playing catch up now. And it is still very hard actually to get a case before the courts in anything like the sort of timescale that used to be the case. And not only is that reflecting our ability to recover the arrears, and it's a big part of the reason for the arrears worsening that's documented in the paper, but it also affects the court cost income that we're able to obtain as well. Thank you.
Can I just, if I can, Chair, can I just ask, John, do you expect that to be recovered then in future years? It's just a delayed thing rather than a total loss.
Certainly, Chair. Officers are looking to put through the cases that you'd expect us to put through into the court system. There will be a backlog. I can't say that there won't be a net loss on that at the end. It all depends on court's performance amongst many other factors.
Yeah.
But we'll do all that we can do to play catch up on that.
Thanks, John.
Thank you. If there's no more questions, if we can move to the resolution, which is to approve recommendations as set out at pages 1128 to 1129. Do we all agree? Excellent. Okay, item 15, which is fees and charges 2022 to 23. Councillor Diakides to introduce the report.
Thank you, Leader. This is again a standard report at this time. We have to notify, to make public what are proposed across the council for various fees and charges. They're numerous at various services. As in previous years, we have managed as well, and we're proposing this year that we will follow simply inflation proofing on everything. We're not going to increase charges across the board on services for any above inflation. A couple of small cases where it looks like it is a bit different is either because there are additional services added that raise the thing, or for other historical reasons where decisions had been made in the past and they're working their way through it. But otherwise, the general principle is just simply inflation proofing. Again, there's numerous cases, numerous details. I think we've got the officers here that can answer probably any particular detail in the list that we've got in the report, the appendices.
Thank you. Do any Cabinet members have questions on the public part of the report? Looking around. Okay. Councillor Corley-Harrison.
Thank you, Chair. There are several new charges introduced at the New River Leisure Centre. So is this because the operating of the centre was brought back in-house and the charges have to be declared? So they're not new charges or increased charges, or are these new services, or are indeed these are an increased charge or new charge to residents? And can you confirm there'll be no introduction of charges for council's tennis courts in coming years?
Thank you, Chair. So in terms of New River Leisure, that needs to be included in the report this year, as you have set out, because that was reflecting the decision made by Cabinet earlier this year. I think the point about tennis courts probably isn't one that officers could respond to at this point. Thank you.
Isidore, did you want to come back on the tennis courts?
Amber has got more information on the detail, yeah, but I don't have.
Councillor Hackasser, did you have anything to add? I mean, I suppose in terms of the tennis courts, fees and charges.
Yes.
Okay, Councillor Harrison, can you just repeat the question on the tennis courts, please? It's very cold in this room, so we're struggling to keep cold whilst listening, I'm afraid.
So if you can just confirm there'll be no introduction of charges for the public for the use of council tennis courts in coming years?
Yeah, I can confirm that is the case. Yeah.
Thank you, Councillor.
Okay, so if there's no more...
Okay,
John wants to come in.
Just to clarify the technicality, Chair, that this report only deals with the fees and charges increases for this forthcoming year. Thank you.
Useful reminder from our Section 151 officer. Okay. So if there's no more questions, if we can... actually, no, we're not taking a decision. That's going to be considered after exempt item 23. So if we can move on to item 16, which is the 2022 to 23 budget and 2022 to 27 medium-term financial strategy report. Councillor Equalities, over to you again.
Thank you, Leader. I mean, there's no perfect budget. I think there's always people need more money than we can possibly do, but I think everyone here might agree, or I hope we will agree, that this budget is almost as good as one could have reasonably expected under the circumstances. I think it is a balanced budget with no extra cuts involved for the first time in years. It is significantly a robust budget again, with adequate safeguards, I think, balances, reserves, and contingencies to ensure that, again, we are reasonably protected from any uncertainties and any problems in future years and avoid the financial crisis we've seen so many other local authorities across the country and across political persuasions suffering this year. It is also an investment budget in general, investing both to save in the future, but also on our political priorities. And I think the report and the introduction in the report shows that, you know, we're investing, as we've promised, a lot on increasing our council housing stock and improving our council housing stock and dealing with homelessness challenges, dealing with various aspects of social services and the demand-led budgets. Our green agenda, a lot of investment on various aspects of it, specific issues, political issues of importance and of concern, like a significant investment on preventing violence against women and young girls, and a number of other issues. I won't go into the detail here, but just only to say as well that, if I dare say it, I think it's probably, in my opinion, also an unashamedly socialist budget. I think not only because the investment in the areas that I mentioned, social housing, social care, green agenda, and so on, but also because it actually balances itself by socialist investment in the future. Every council housing that we add to the council stock is going to save down the road enough, quite a substantial amount of money from our base budget by reducing our reliance on expensive private provision of that temporary accommodation. Similarly, our investment on the green energy saving in our buildings or in our council houses, etc., is going to save as well in the future, and so on. So there are quite a lot of mechanisms of that nature. Overall, the only thing that I would like to stress a bit more in here is there is the issue, obviously, of the council tax increase. I think that it is, under the circumstances, the right level of council tax increase is within the government parameters. 1.9% we're increasing, or we're proposing to increase for next year our council's budget, and 1% extra for the extra cost of social care. That brings it to 2.9%, which bearing in mind that the government's estimate of inflation next year is 3.5%, that means that it means no real increase in the end. And as the report shows as well, or in the introduction, it adds up to about 80 pence per week at band 4. Now that is probably less than a pint a month, if you like, but having said that, even that for some of our residents would be quite a bit, quite a thing. Therefore, the budget as well consolidates the previous decision to help with the council tax for the about 16,000 we estimate of our residents right now, so that it will be sort of like cashing at least any sort of hurt against the more vulnerable people. Overall, I think it is a good budget, and I hope that everybody will support it as it goes out to consultation. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Dokides. Is there any questions on that? Councillor Carter?
Yeah, just a quick one. Thank you for underlining the values that are embedded in this budget, positive values that we all believe in passionately. So I'm not going to cover that, but I just wanted one question, which is that obviously it addresses the current pressures that we're under, but it does show that the future challenges are still very much alive. I just wanted actually to ask, is there any light in the tunnel? In other words, are there any announcements or any kind of points coming up that we can kind of look forward to that could change the sort of bleak future?
Can I, before bring the director in, because you will have things to say, definitely probably more practical than what I'm going to say that would sound. One thing that we are making a big effort, and we're improving year on year, but making quite a lot, is improving our the way that we manage our affairs in general, better planning ahead, better analysis of things as much as possible. Don't forget, for years, local authorities have been basically hammered by the austerity measures to the point that it became crisis management overall. Now, by keep on improving, if you notice in the budget as well, a lot of investment is on trying to improve the basic management of affairs in order to be able to make long-term savings on it, whether it is the demand-led budget, significant increases, whether it is what called the backroom services, things that were mentioned before about the legal fees or legal sort of work, etc. You see, there is an investment on that one and so on and all that kind of thing. So overall, I think that I take it that there's still, the more we improve that way, the better, the more savings we will find in the future, basically through exactly that, that particular thing. I remember an old political mentor of mine, keep on repeating always that inefficiency in the public sector is a robbery from the working class. So it's just, is that kind of thing. So that is just one aspect. But also, as our socialist objectives at the moment, increasing the council housing stock by so much, insourcing some of the services that have been outsourced, and they proved to be a financial disaster, to be honest. All these things as well will help us from that side. As regards the government perspective and the outside, I'd rather let the director answer that one.
Thank you, Councillor Dokides, Chair. So that's quite a big question, actually, that Councillor Carter has pitched there, and to an extent in the report we try to address that. The backdrop for this budget is somewhat different to the ones in recent years, because the government has, through the Spending Review 21, has actually made some 3-year declarations, and we wouldn't usually in past history, in the last few years, had that sense of what's going to be happening into the future. But we do this time, so I'd like that to be a more positive backdrop than it is. But as the report points out, given the grant announcements that were made by the Chancellor about a month ago, whilst there is a short-term improvement in the resourcing of the authority from government, although clearly not enough because we're still having to depend on reserves to get next year to work and to deal with the growth pressures. When you look forward, the major year-on-year increase in our resources that we know of at the moment comes from council tax, actually, not from government grants. So that there is that backdrop. We might get a better or worse position than is actually assumed in this paper when we get the local government financial settlement, which is going to come out next week on the 16th. But that can work either way, actually, because we have tried to take a balanced set of assumptions. So we'll see where that takes us. And obviously, to the extent that it varies the assumptions we've made, that will change the figures that come back to you in your February meeting. There are other changes that can affect our environment, and particularly minded of the fact that there have been some very large sectorial sorts of reviews put back by government for obvious reasons with the various crises that have been there. But there's one on fair funding piece of work that they have been thinking about for some time, and there's also some business rates exercises that are also underway. Again, Chair, they could go either way. Obviously, Haringey is an authority that has, higher needs than most authorities in this country. We know the factors for that, and those have not been recognised in government formula updates for some years now, almost a decade. So it depends on how radical they want to be, really, in taking those needs into consideration in the future funding of authorities such as ourselves. We don't know. But I think, Chair, we have to assume that even though there's quite a lot of unknowns there, that the report talks about the fact that how the budget works for next year, but recognises that there is still a gap in front of the authority when we move beyond that. We probably have to assume for the time being that most of that solution will have to be worked through locally. Thank you.
Councillor Brabazon.
I just wanted to ask you a bit about the reference to temporary accommodation, and if you could comment on the fact that you said there's an unquantified potential pressure regarding temporary accommodation budgets and a reduction in rent collection rates. Now, that's my first question, whether they've got any further information on that and what you think it might be, or what it might be what's behind that, really. And the second question, really, is whether you've had any further information from government about the distribution of the funding. I'm thinking particularly of the 2.6 billion capital for special needs, and whether there's been any guidance or any information about how that might be distributed across the country. Thank you.
Thank you. As Councillor Brabazon said, temporary accommodation is one of the challenges that has become even more profound in the last 18 months. We have been feeling lower than normal collection rates on that, and in part that's because it hasn't been so easy for quite a period of time to maintain the direct connectivity with the families concerned and to have the sort of relationship that we would normally have with them. And that can affect our ability to make sure that we've got all of the relevant benefits claims and universal credit claims in place. There is a piece of officer work which is underway now, Chair, which is involving authority housing benefits officers and homes for Haringey officers, working closely together to make sure that we can catch up on that as effective we can do. And that will improve both the current year's position, but I think also the future years. And there will be more reporting, I think, on how that is impacting probably in later quarterly monitoring reports that we have. On the special needs point, I'm afraid I don't have any more information tonight as to how that national capital allocation will be distributed. Thank you.
Thank you, John. Councillor Dawn.
Thank you, Chair. So I welcome the report, but also I welcome that there's no savings proposals, but also there are a bit of investment. And John, if you can touch some of the investments that we are proposing, that will be really helpful for Councillor Diagidis. That will be helpful for the people who are actually watching, the audience, so they know where we are investing.
Very broadly, before John comes in, the director, I think we are learning to use the 5-year kind of like budget projection, the MTFS, more and more and more, and therefore investment, done in such a way that it really integrates with the current situation and how to save money in the future, how to be more efficient and more effective. And that's, but take the HRA part of it, you see a huge investment there, both on achieving our council housing targets, with more than 3,000 houses projected to be built. £200 million on improving the council housing stock is a huge investment. There is also, you will see about the in the children's and education side. I mean, huge investment to catch up with the backlogs on over the years of austerity with the school buildings, for example. Is going up and up and so on. And I think there are other things like quite a lot of investment on energy efficiency and improvements of that type of our own buildings, bringing a lot of our industrial and commercial estate, which has been, inefficiently, if you like, used at the moment because of lack of investment in the past. Just gradually good plans, all those things. But I'll let John to go into more detail, on it. Yeah, John, if you want to add to that.
Councillor Diakidis has given a fairly full rendition there of where the growth is at. So there's, as has been said, there's really two forms. There's a step up in our revenue funding, primarily actually towards the meeting the key needs of the vulnerable residents in the care services that we have, and that's over and above actually quite a lot of growth that's already been built into the budget. So it really does show what the level of demand on those services is. But there's also investment in prevention of violence against women and girls of 0.6 million, investment in the climate prevention measures and in our physical environment, and both in revenue capital, so some investment just to make sure that the authority can continue to be fit for purpose and a well-run organisation in terms of our capacity to do so. But on the capital side, obviously, there's been a lot of money that's already in the budget to go into the schools estate in the previous year. This year, we have some more money going in for residential care provision in children's services, which is a really important initiative. More money going into the public realm, and actually significant investment in roads and highways into the physical estate, as well as including the new civic centre. Thank you.
Can I just add, leader, just because it's quite an important thing. I don't want to get Councillor Chandawani going. We will talk all night about it, but we do invest again heavily on using skillfully IT, revisions and to make the services more efficient in general and in particular, both capital and revenue. So I don't know if you want to say more, Sim, about that. Yeah.
Not really, Lisa. It's too cold. I'm really sorry, but if anyone has any questions, I don't mind answering.
It's in the papers. I think it's worth pointing out, but I think it's there in the papers. All the additional investment of which is quite significant. Is there any more questions from the cabinet, or so Councillor Das-Neves?
Sorry, I know everyone's cold, but I wanted to come in more with a comment than anything, which is that I'm really pleased to see the level of investment that we have made in growth. And I would say that as a cabinet member for adult social care, it's pretty clear that the government hasn't made any promises or delivered on anything for social care, and it continues to be a huge area for us, and we've seen huge growth. I think we've already covered that in papers earlier, in demand post-pandemic. So really important for us to, and really I feel very supportive of that, for us to invest in that area, and it's so important to so many of our residents, and also really glad to see us support measures to support women and girls experiencing violence and domestic abuse. So really feel supportive of that, and just wanted to emphasise that really. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Das-Neves. Councillor Corley-Harrison.
Thanks, Chair. Councillor Diakoulis, in 2.2 you say that a future funding settlement is in no way anticipated to allow the council to set a balanced budget in future years without the need for further savings to be delivered. So given that and some of the warnings from the director, is it not irresponsible to not seek a single revenue saving this year? In 8.2.20, you make the point that TfL funding for projects has largely ceased, and we obviously all know why. But in the capital programme, it's assumed that TfL grants will provide millions of pounds of new funding in coming years. So how can these assumptions be made? The two don't correlate. And given the amount of increased borrowing, which will obviously mean increased repayments and increased interest, it appears there's going to be a significant impact on the revenue account in coming years, from probably around 2025, I think, something like that. Isn't that likely to mean having to find further savings and cuts to fund the payment of interest and the repayments? Because that just doesn't seem to be covered at all.
Can I just, before, again, I'll bring the director in, because obviously you and the public and everybody else would need the assurance, not just of a politician, but of the actual, Section 151 officer, making sure that everything is above board. But can I say that, yes, if you look at our medium-term financial strategy from last year, the year before, always we look at the 5 years down the road, we take everything into account, all the factors that you mentioned, the how much we borrow or we're projecting to borrow, and what the loan charges would be, all that is built into it, as well as whatever income is coming because of the extra investment, all the various aspects of it. And you find out at always we predict, or always, the last decade at least, we predict that 5 years down the road there will be a significant gap, and unless we continue our efforts, we're not going to bridge it. That is the situation. It's not different than previous years. It's not going to be different, I suspect, even the next year and the year after, because that is the nature of the system that we're operating now, the last 10, 15 years at least. But broadly, I take your points. I ask the same questions myself every day, basically, but I think that is the situation. We haven't taken, as far as I can ascertain, 100% can be certain. There are so many uncertainties coming down the road. As far as I know, we are actually not taking any risks beyond what it would have been very, very reasonable and prudent. But I don't know whether the director wants to add more to more substance to what I said.
Thank you, Chair. So the 3 points that you made there, Councillor Colley-Harrison, the first one is about the fact that this budget is very different, as you say, to the budgets of recent years, insofar as it's not actually putting forward any new savings for consultation. But the report is clear that there is a deliberate strategy behind it. But first of all, I think it's worth noting that there is still a material level of savings that have to be put in place that have been agreed in previous years' plans. And obviously, it's important that the organisation can give proper space to make sure that they can be delivered. That's a vital part of this budget strategy, actually, and if they were not to do so, that in itself would cause the budget gap to open up. But also, there is an appreciation that the size of the longer term, the medium to longer term financial challenge that the authority has, unless some of the factors that were spoken about earlier come to be, will require some quite new solutions. And they will take time during the course of this year to be thought of and to be discussed and to be developed before they can be considered in next year's budget strategy. And it's very, very difficult to deliver the existing plans plus new plans, plus to have time to develop those in-depth new approaches all at the same time. So we have, as an authority, created about a year ago now the strategic budget planning reserve, which is allowing, as part of this strategy, to create some time to spend that time looking at different solutions which can actually change the position of the authority in the longer term. The TfL point that you made, I note that, Councillor Colley-Harrison, essentially what the report is saying is that with the difficulties that TfL have got for this forthcoming year, we're going to have to assume that we are, in effect, filling that space funding-wise, although I do still hope that we might get some more positive announcements which can mean that we don't have to fully do so and we will get more of the sort of usual funding that we get. The capital programme as constructed shows the sort of spend we think we might have to have in years 2 and 3 and onwards, but assumes that the TfL by that point, if not before, will be in a position to start providing the sort of funding that we've had in the past. And then with regard to the affordability of the capital programme, which is a very major factor of our financial planning, and as Councillor Diakidi said, has to be treated, with extreme sort of care. You will see from the report that we forecasted about 68% of the capital programme that's put there will either be self-financed, i.e. in undertaking those schemes we will make consequent savings that will pay for the cost of the borrowing associated with them, or we will have external resources, some form of grant, and it's the 32% that will fall upon the borough. Now, that is still a big obligation upon the authority at the time when the budget is stretched, but the fact is that the authority has legal responsibilities, many legal responsibilities in respect to the public domain, schools and other factors which oblige it to carry out capital expenditure. And in effect, it's another indication of how the funding regime, the government funding regime for local authorities doesn't fully work, that it doesn't meet all of those costs, and we have to try and find a way over the longer term to make that work. But there has been a lot of care in putting together this capital programme, which recognises the pressure that it brings onto our revenue programme. Thank you.
Thank you, John. So if there's no more questions, if we can move to the resolution, the recommendations which are set out on page 1258. Do we all agree? Agreed. Okay. Item 17, which is the decentralised energy networks, the DEN, and this is for the outline business case. And over to Councillor Hakata, who's going to introduce the report.
Thank you, Chair. This is for for Cabinet to approve the work on the outline business case for the decentralised energy network. The DENs, as they are known, are a core element of the Climate Change Committee's plan for decarbonising or becoming carbon neutral by 2050, and they have said that we need to see 1 in 5 homes heated by a DEN by that time. To be clear, though, Cabinet are not being asked to approve the construction of the DENs itself. Cabinet is being asked to approve the outline business case, which sets out the basic framework for a full business case. Due to the complexity of this project, this is not something that can be written in a weekend. It will take months of careful analysis and design, not simply of the infrastructure, but which will carry low carbon heat to thousands of homes, but also of the wholly public sector owned energy company driven by social value, not profit margin. So alongside our active travel ambitions, set out in our walking and cycling action plan, our low traffic neighbourhood programme, our standout retrofit programme, our corporate decarbonising programme, our urban greening programmes that we're coming up with, the upcoming urban forest programme and the urban meadows programme as well. This plays a key part in our climate action plan and our ambitions to become net zero. So with that, I will pass on to questions.
Okay, over to the Cabinet for any questions. Okay, Councillor Corley-Harrison.
Thanks, Chair. So as we know with district energy networks, homes are locked into a single supplier for their heating and electricity, which creates a market monopoly situation. The paper mentions price controls, saying consumers won't be paying more than the price of a realistic alternative heating system. But if energy from the scheme increases in cost, would the council take on any potential losses? And there have been problems with council-run DENs in Southwark. In fact, they reached national press very, very recently, with poor standards, poor customer service, residents left without power for months on end, exploding radiators, all sorts of issues. Given Haringey Council's and Homes for Haringey's less than stellar track record on fixing similar problems, how can residents be assured that these DENs will be installed and maintained to the very highest standard? And at 2.1, the Cabinet member introduction states that you want to create an energy company that puts residents before profits. But in the appendix 4.10.3, it states that the council will receive dividends as shareholder. So are there going to be dividends and therefore profits or not?
Thank you. Well, first of all, what's important here is that it will be a social value-led project. I think when people look at DENs elsewhere, they're actually private sector projects. In terms of, I will pass over to the officers shortly to give you more detailed responses to this, but I would say that the key here is actually the monopoly model, which is just a basic function of the way that it has to work due to the infrastructure. Also protects the customer, and in a setup such as this, we have been very clear that we want to ensure that social value is at the heart of the project and not profit. I'll pass over to our officers to give some more detail on that.
Thank you, Councillor. So the general principles are set out in the report at 6.39. So it's important to think about the residents and customers of this will get significant benefits from this, and the principles set out in that are proposed that this is an affordable energy supply that is benchmarked against the higher carbon alternative. And the expectation is, and all the modelling and work that's been done, which includes sensitivities in terms of fluctuations in prices, that this can still remain affordable. But clearly we need to keep to the principles that are set out in the report on this. And I will pass to Joe Baker, who is the head of carbon management, to pick up some of the other points. Thank you.
Yes, just to add on to that, yes, there are issues with the Southwark Decentralised Energy Network, but there's also lots of positive learnings out there from Islington, Leeds, Camden, Enfield, etc. So in developing the full business case, we are going to be looking at all the analysis of these networks, and we're putting that learning into practice as we design the full implementation here in Haringey. Obviously, the DENs can bring wider benefits to customers alongside the returns on investment to the organisation. And as we move again towards the full business case, we're working out the appropriateness of that to ensure that the principles that the council has alluded to will be adhered to, and that the benefits are there for the residents.
Thank you, Joe. So if there's no more questions, if we can move on, and the decision for this will be taken after the consideration of exempt item 24. So item 18, which is the disabled blue badge fraud enforcement policy. Councillor Chandwani.
I think I'm on the right mic. I don't know why I have two. Thank you, Lisa. Over the past 3 years, disabled parking has been a priority for this council. 2 years ago, Environmental and Community Safety Panel led an intense investigation of how we can improve this service for our disabled residents. That went on to form the Disabled Parking Action Plan, which took recommendations for scrutiny and added more recommendations that we obtained from disabled residents. It is clear that blue badge theft and misuse is both a big concern and a huge threat to disabled people in our borough. Blue badge theft has increased sixfold in the UK since 2015, and Haringey is not immune to this growth in crime. To give everybody an example of this, a couple of months ago in my ward in West Green, the police and enforcement team carried out an investigation, an operation, and they found six stolen badges used on 4 roads in 2 hours. Blue badge misuse is also on the rise, whereby the badge is being used by somebody without the holder present, or either being used by a spouse, a parent or a child, and sometimes also by people who exploit disabled people, like gangs who could be hiding drugs and weapons in vulnerable people's homes or using their homes for organised crime, otherwise known as cocoon. This policy covers all possible eventualities and a framework of what action should be taken in different circumstances. It's carefully crafted so that we do not enforce against victims whilst having a tough stance on perpetrators. Disabled people need to have confidence in our enforcement, and there's no better way to achieve that than involve disabled people in shaping the policies that are designed to protect their rights and interests. This policy was co-produced by disabled residents from the Physical Disabilities Reference Group, our parking team, and was aided by the legal and audit team. The Physical Disabilities Reference Group pushed us to be tougher, challenged us to be more robust in our enforcement. They were extremely passionate about this matter, and this paper did not hit this cabinet table until they were happy. This is not engagement or consultation. This was genuine co-production. It's a policy by residents for residents, and they will continue to hold me or whoever the cabinet member is to account in its implementations. Colleagues, I hope you agree to this latest policy development and a series of changes that have come and will come to this chamber, hopefully with heating, and continue to enhance our disabled parking offer. Can I also say, before I end, a huge thanks to Dawn, Denise and Tim and the parking team, and also to Graham, Maria, Huda, David and all of the residents from the Physical Disabilities Reference Group. Lisa, I'm happy to take questions.
Thank you. Questions from the Cabinet? Councillor Carter.
This is a really welcome addition, because I think there's a lot of people have been frustrated by the fact that, you know, the blue badge crime is endemic and really problematic. I just wondered if you could just outline a little bit. Obviously, most of the enforcement ultimately comes down to the police. So I'm just wondering if you can maybe clarify that for me, that fact, that idea.
So what we've done as part of this bigger kind of wider plan of addressing disabled parking is we've invested in a new IT program. So all of our civil enforcement officers, I was going to say CEOs, but people get that mixed up with chief executive officers, traffic wardens basically. Our traffic wardens can now tell from a badge while it's in the window straight away whether that's stolen, etc. What was happening before is that we needed the police to check it, or we needed to get the staff, go back to the office and double check it, and by that time the car's gone. It's a joint operation, so the police can request a tow and we can request a tow as civil enforcement officers as well. Obviously, sometimes when you're doing that and the resident is there, or the person who, sorry, not the resident, but the person who is committing the blue badge fraud doesn't seem to always be happy when we tow their car away, so sometimes it's really important we have the police there.
Any more questions from the Cabinet? Councillor Crawley-Harrison.
Sure, Councillor Chandwali will be delighted to know I have no questions for her.
Excellent, thank you, Luke.
You was on my list. All right, so if there's no more questions, if we can move to the resolution, which is to approve the recommendations as set out at page 1544. Do we all agree? Excellent. Okay, so item 19, which is the acquisition of the leasehold interest at 78 to 92 Stanford Road. I have Councillor Dikides, but I believe it's Councillor Gordon that's going to introduce the report.
Yes, yeah, thank you. This is just asking for approval of the acquisition of the leasehold of 78 to 92 Stanford Road. This site sits within the creative enterprise zone. It was a former ice cream factory, but hasn't been so for quite a long time, and it's really been the site of it's now a derelict site and has been the centre of some quite extensive antisocial behaviour. The reason that we want to take over, we own the freehold, we want to take over the lease, and we see this now as an opportunity for this to be part of our strategy for improving the amount of workspace that there is in that particular area. It fits in with our general overall strategy for increasing the amount of workspace, especially for startup companies or for companies that want to expand. There is an increasing demand in this market, which we're hoping to meet, and it means that with the council being in control of this, that any leases going forward, we can make sure that that there is we can sort of ask for mitigations of paying London living wage and so on and so forth, and making sure that the site offers a very high quality design and build of the accommodation that we would have. So this would be for purely employment spaces, and yeah, I'd recommend the report on that basis.
Thank you, Councillor Gordon. Any questions from the Cabinet? Sorry, this is on the public part of the report. Yep, Councillor Dikides.
Thanks. Speaking as a ward councillor for that area, can I really welcome that development, because this particular building has been a constant source of antisocial behaviour as well as an eyesore in the area. And as Councillor Gordon said, there is a demand for good industrial space there. By investing now to get out of this antiquated lease and lease back sort of like arrangements we had, we'll be able to get a good asset well used, generating an income, as well as being much more helpful to the local community. I think that, it will make a difference to the local neighbourhood. Yes.
Thank you, Councillor Equalities. Any other Cabinet members? Okay, Councillor Corley-Harrison.
Thanks, Chair. A business case doesn't seem to have been prepared for the scheme as yet. When can we expect to see it so that it can be reviewed? And if the council's unable to come up with a viable business case when it is prepared, or if the case is thought to be weak, let's say, is there danger of losing money from the Future High Streets Fund, or would it be reallocated to other projects potentially?
I'll just take the second point first. That what we're expecting is that this would be cost neutral to the council, and if anything, it could be give us a positive income going forward. But I would ask on the timescale. My memory's failing me, so I'd ask officers to come in on the detail on that. Apologies.
Yeah, I think we'll be looking at just about before the summer. And just to stress that a feasibility study has been undertaken, and so the recommendation is in part informed by that feasibility study. What that showed was that there was a fair bit of headroom in terms of the position that we're exploring at the moment. So it is with confidence that we recommend the acquisition for the purpose of use as a workspace in the future.
Thank you. So if there's no further questions.
The funding?
Oh, okay. Question on funding. Is that you, Peter?
Yeah, yes, in terms of the Future High Streets funding, I mean, I think that'll be a fairly readily reallocated. The other source of funding is something called the Strategic Investment Pot. And one of the reasons why we are acquiring this way at this point in time is to ensure that we can meet the timeline surrounding with that particular funding pot. So hence the desire to return to Cabinet just before the summer with a revised business case that we'll go on to implement.
Thanks, Peter.
Thank you, Peter. Okay, so the decision for this will be taken after exempt item 25. Item 20, which is the minutes of other bodies. Can Cabinet note the minutes of the Cabinet member sign-ins? Noted. Okay. A little nod. Yeah. All right, there are no new items of urgent business, so if we can move on to item 22, which is the exclusion of the press and public, and we will now consider items 23 to 27, which contain exempt information. So can I move that the press and public be excluded from the remainder of the meeting to consider this exempt information as defined under paragraphs 3 and 5, part 1, schedule 12A of the Local Government Act 1972, and I will memorise that one day. And can all Cabinet members agree, please? Okay. All right, so I'm now going to just pause for the stream. Stop.